This show is part of OnePlace, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to today's briefing. We are covering a major shift in diplomatic rhetoric, legal battles involving international figures, and a controversial national prayer event. Let's get right into the headlines for you.
Trump warns Taiwan against seeking formal independence from China.
U.S. prepares to indict former Cuban leader Raul Castro.
Iraqi militia commander charged with plotting global Jewish attacks.
A mentally ill Canadian woman seeks legal-assisted dying.
State Department adopts controversial language regarding migration and refugees.
Colorado's governor reduces the prison sentence for Tina Peters.
MAGA supporters react to Trump's high-stakes visit to Beijing.
The administration plans a massive prayer event this weekend.
First, the Taiwan situation. President Trump has sent a very clear message to Taiwan following his two-day summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. He explicitly cautioned the island against formally declaring independence, stating that he is not looking to have someone go independent. This is a significant moment because it highlights the delicate balancing act the U.S. maintains between supporting Taiwan's self-defense and keeping a stable relationship with Beijing. Trump mentioned that he wants both sides to cool down, emphasizing that he isn't looking to fight a war 9,500 miles away. While the U.S. is legally bound to provide Taiwan with the means for self-defense, Trump's comments suggest a strong desire to avoid any provocation that could lead to a direct military conflict with China, especially after hearing Xi's strong feelings on the matter.
It is interesting to see how this aligns with the existing status quo. Most people in Taiwan actually favor maintaining the current situation, where they neither declare independence nor unite with the mainland. President Lai Ching-te has even said that a formal declaration isn't necessary because Taiwan already views itself as a sovereign nation. However, Beijing remains incredibly hostile toward him, calling him a destroyer of peace. During the summit, Xi Jinping warned that the Taiwan question is the most important issue in the relationship, and that any mishandling could lead to a collision between the two nations. Trump seems to believe that a conflict is unlikely because he thinks Xi doesn't want a war either. By reiterating that U.S. policy hasn't changed, Trump is trying to lower the temperature while acknowledging China's intense focus on the island.
Next, the Castro indictment. The U.S. Justice Department is reportedly moving toward a criminal indictment of 94-year-old Raul Castro. This stems from an incident nearly 30 years ago when two aircraft operated by the humanitarian group Brothers to the Rescue were shot down. The group was known for searching for migrants in the Florida Straits and dropping anti-Castro leaflets. 4 people were killed in that 1996 attack, which occurred while Raul was the armed forces minister. This potential indictment comes at a time of extreme tension, as the Trump administration has already implemented an oil blockade that has left Cuba essentially out of fuel. President Trump recently commented on the situation, calling Cuba a nation in decline, and noting that the people there need help. If a grand jury approves the charges, it would be a massive symbolic and legal blow to the legacy of the Castro family.
The timing is also quite notable because the CIA director was recently in Havana meeting with officials. While the Cuban government has argued in the past that the planes violated their airspace, international investigators found the attack actually happened over international waters. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has already praised the move, calling the charges long overdue. This isn't just about a decades-old tragedy. It's part of a broader pressure campaign. The island is currently facing a massive energy crisis, and an indictment of a former leader who only stepped down in 2021 adds another layer of diplomatic isolation. Even though Raul Castro is no longer the head of the Communist Party, he remains a powerful figure. This move signals that the U.S. is willing to pursue historical grievances, even as the current humanitarian situation on the island continues to deteriorate rapidly.
Now to the terror plot. A commander of an Iraqi militia, Mohammed Bakr Saad Dawood al-Saadi, has been arrested and charged with plotting more than a dozen terrorist attacks across North America and Europe. Prosecutors allege that Saadi, who is linked to the U.S.-designated group Kataib Hezbollah, was planning to target Jewish institutions in cities like New York, Los Angeles, and London. He was reportedly caught after trying to recruit an undercover agent whom he believed was a Mexican cartel member to carry out a bombing at a prominent U.S. synagogue. The criminal complaint details a series of attacks that have already occurred in Europe, including arson at a synagogue in the Netherlands and a stabbing in London. These plots were allegedly intended as retaliation for the Iran war and to further the goals of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, showing a very dangerous level of international coordination.
The details in the complaint are chilling, especially the recorded phone calls where Saadi allegedly asked about the cost of hiring someone for a bombing operation. He was taken into custody in Turkey before being handed over to the FBI and transported to Manhattan for trial. His lawyer is claiming this is a political prosecution, but the sheer scope of the alleged activities is staggering. We are talking about 18 reported terror attacks in Europe and 2 in Canada since March. The targets weren't just religious sites. They included financial institutions like the Bank of New York Mellon in Amsterdam. This case highlights the ongoing threat from regional militias in Iraq that have ties to Iran and their ability to project violence far beyond the Middle East. It's a stark reminder of the security challenges facing Jewish communities globally right now.
Next, the maid debate. In Canada, a 49-year-old woman named Claire Brosseau is challenging the law to gain access to medically assisted dying, or MAID. Brosseau has struggled with severe bipolar disorder and PTSD for decades, trying every treatment from medication to electric shock therapy. She describes herself as functionally terminal, unable to work or even leave her house. Currently, Canada's assisted dying laws do not allow for mental illness as the sole underlying condition. The government has delayed expanding the law twice, citing concerns that the healthcare system isn't ready. Brosseau, however, says she cannot wait any longer and has asked an Ontario court for an exemption. She argues that she wants a safe death rather than being forced to do something horrific. Her case brings the intense ethical debate over mental health and euthanasia back into the spotlight as the country weighs its next steps.
This is such a difficult issue because it touches on the very definition of suffering and autonomy. While polls show that many Canadians support the general idea of assisted dying, the inclusion of mental illness is much more controversial. Some advocates and medical experts warn that expanding the program could become a way to alleviate the suffering of people who might be better served by better housing or healthcare. They worry that if the system fails to provide adequate support for the disabled or mentally ill, death becomes the only option left. Brosseau's situation is heartbreaking because she feels she has exhausted every possible medical avenue. As a parliamentary committee reviews whether to move forward with the expansion next year, her legal challenge will likely serve as a landmark case for how Canada treats those with severe, treatment-resistant mental health conditions.
Now, the State Department. The State Department is undergoing a dramatic shift in how it discusses migration and refugees, adopting terms that were once considered fringe or even toxic. Diplomats are now using words like remigration, which refers to encouraging immigrants to return to their home countries. Critics and former officials, like Robbie Marks, point out that this language is often used by far-right groups in Europe to describe a cleansing of migrants. Another controversial term being used is replacement immigration, which echoes the Great Replacement theory promoted by white nationalists. The administration is essentially trying to change the Overton window, which means mainstreaming ideas that were previously seen as politically unacceptable. This shift isn't just about vocabulary. It reflects a fundamental change in how the U.S. intends to handle its refugee assistance programs and its relationship with international organizations like the United Nations.
The reaction to this has been polarized. Right-wing advocacy groups like the John Birch Society have welcomed the change, claiming it validates their concerns about global migration policies. On the other hand, experts like David Beer from the Cato Institute argue that using these terms provides legitimacy to concepts that endorse ethnic cleansing and a total block on legal immigration. The State Department recently issued a statement denouncing replacement immigration, which the far right has interpreted as a major victory. While some argue that these terms have statistical origins, their adoption by the government is seen by many as an endorsement of nationalist ideologies. This change in diplomatic language signals a much more restrictive and ideologically driven approach to global migration, moving away from the traditional humanitarian focus that has defined U.S. refugee policy for decades.
Next, the Peters commutation. Colorado Governor Jared Polis has made the controversial decision to reduce the prison sentence of Tina Peters, the former county clerk convicted of tampering with election equipment. Peters was originally sentenced to nearly 9 years for her role in a security breach of voting machines following the 2020 election. She had claimed she was trying to prove baseless theories of a rigged election. Governor Polis announced that she will now be released on parole in June 2026, effectively cutting her sentence in half. This decision follows a long pressure campaign from the Trump administration to free her. Polis explained that while he disagrees with her actions and her speech, he believes the original trial judge improperly factored her protected speech into the sentencing. He stated that his focus was on the facts and ensuring the sentence was fair under the law.
This move is likely to be very unpopular with many Democrats and election officials in Colorado, who saw Peters' original sentence as a necessary consequence for undermining election integrity. The trial judge had previously called her a charlatan and a snake oil salesman, criticizing her for using her office to peddle false claims. However, a state appeals court recently ruled that she should be resentenced because her First Amendment rights might have been violated during that blistering critique. By stepping in now, Polis is attempting to resolve a legal gray area, even if it means releasing a figure who has become a symbol for election deniers. Peters has always maintained she is a hero, while her critics see her as a threat to democracy. This commutation ensures she will spend about 600 days in total behind bars before her release.
Now, the Beijing trip. Donald Trump's recent trip to Beijing has left many of his China hawkish supporters in the MAGA movement wondering about the future of U.S. trade policy. For years, Trump has used aggressive rhetoric, accusing China of ripping off America and stealing technology. However, during this visit, he was greeted with a red carpet and a military band, and he even called President Xi Jinping a friend. While some business deals were announced, such as Boeing securing an aircraft order and NVIDIA getting the green light to sell semiconductors to some Chinese firms, there were no major breakthroughs on the massive tariffs currently in place. This shift in tone is a stark contrast to the trade war that saw tariffs climb as high as 145%. Supporters are watching closely to see if this is a genuine softening of his stance or just a tactical diplomatic maneuver.
Despite the pleasantries, the underlying tensions remain very high. Just before the summit, the U.S. sanctioned Chinese firms for helping Iran, and the issue of Taiwan continues to loom over every conversation. Many Republican hawks are concerned that Trump hasn't moved forward with a delayed $14 billion arms sale to Taiwan. They worry that the friendly rhetoric might signal a retreat from the hardline positions that defined his first term and his recent campaign. Figures like Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance have built their careers on China bashing, and they are now part of an administration that is trying to balance economic aggression with high-level diplomacy. The MAGA movement is essentially waiting to see if the fantastic trade deals Trump mentioned will actually materialize, or if the relationship will return to the confrontational status quo once the red carpet is rolled up.
Finally, the Mall Rally. The Trump administration is preparing for a massive prayer event on the National Mall this weekend, called Rededicate 250. The event is being billed as a once-in-a-lifetime national moment to rededicate the country as one nation under God. It features a lineup of high-profile speakers, including cabinet members like Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth, as well as Christian celebrities like musician Chris Tomlin and actor Jonathan Rumi. While supporters see it as a beautiful tribute to America's religious roots, critics are raising concerns about the exclusionary nature of the event. Out of 19 listed faith leaders, 18 are Christian and most are evangelical. Groups like Americans United for Separation of Church and State argue that the festival promotes Christian nationalism rather than religious freedom, casting a vision of the country that doesn't reflect its full diversity.
The event has already sparked a wave of both support and opposition. Activist Sean Foist is leading pre-events in favor of the rally, while the Interfaith Alliance is organizing progressive religious leaders to voice their concerns. The inclusion of figures like Sadie Robertson Huff and House Speaker Mike Johnson shows just how deeply this event is tied to the administration's core political and religious base. President Trump is expected to send a recorded video message, further cementing the link between the White House and this specific religious vision. For many, this is a powerful statement of faith and patriotism as the nation approaches its 250th birthday. For others, it's a worrying sign of a government-backed initiative that prioritizes one faith over all others, potentially deepening the cultural and religious divides that already exist across the country.
That wraps up our briefing for today. Thank you for joining us for these important updates. We will be back tomorrow with more focused coverage of the stories that matter most.